Imagine a blade, untouched, untested. It never cuts, never protects, never fulfills its purpose. Now imagine that same blade placed in fire, folded, hammered, burned, again and again. Every blow shapes it, every flame purifies it. It is through fire that a weapon is born, not in comfort, not in silence, but in pain. Suffering is not a glitch. It is an inevitable part of being human. But how we face it, that defines how we live, or whether we merely survive. From an early age, we're taught to fear pain, to hide it behind smiles, to numb it with cheap distractions. We move through life avoiding discomfort, as if it were a sign that something is wrong, when in truth, discomfort is life calling us to change. What if everything you've been avoiding is exactly what you need to confront? The Stoics didn't seek pain. They weren't martyrs, but they understood something most people spend their entire lives trying to forget. Pain can be a teacher, if you're willing to listen. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of an empire on the brink of collapse, tormented by illness, betrayal, and loss, wrote in his private meditations, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Those words weren't written in triumph. They were written while the world was falling apart around him. And still, he stood firm, because pain, when seen with clarity, stops being the enemy. It becomes fuel for strength. It strips away the surface and reveals what is true. Epictetus, born a slave and crippled by his master, lived with limitations that would crush most. Yet he understood that no one can harm you more than your own thoughts. He said, "You are not disturbed by events, but by your perception of them." And Seneca, even in the face of death, held the calm of a sage. Because to the Stoic, not even death is to be feared. What matters is not how much we suffer, but what we build from it. This video won't give you tricks to avoid pain, but it will offer a path to give it meaning. Pain will not be discarded. It will be transformed. We'll explore how the Stoics embraced discomfort with courage, how adversity became opportunity, and how you, wherever you are in your journey, can begin applying this in your life. Because maybe what you now call suffering is exactly what's forging your inner strength. Let's begin. Most people treat pain as a detour, something to be avoided, something to be handled quickly, as if it were a crack in the glass of life. But to the Stoics, pain wasn't a crack. It was the glass being reshaped. It was the opportunity to rebuild what had once been invisible. Character. There is no virtue without a test, just as there is no muscle without resistance. Discipline, patience, courage, they are all born in friction, and friction hurts. Seneca wrote that suffering is training for the soul, that if the gods wanted to prepare someone for greatness, they would throw them in a hardship, not out of cruelty, but out of trust. And that's a powerful reversal. While the world sees pain as a sign of abandonment, Stoics saw it as a call to inner maturity. Take Viktor Frankl, not a Stoic by definition, but Stoic in essence. Imprisoned in concentration camps, stripped of everything, he chose to find meaning even in the horror. And there, surrounded by death, he discovered a universal truth. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. That line could have come straight from Epictetus, because that is exactly what he taught. Freedom begins not in the absence of pain, but in the judgment we assign to it. Now look at our time. We live in an era that worships comfort. Microwaves, delivery apps, distractions one tap away. We've engineered a world where discomfort feels almost unbearable. And paradoxically, we've grown more fragile. How many people give up after one criticism? How many collapse after a breakup? How many lose themselves at the first sign of failure? It's not that these pains are small. It's that we were never taught to carry them with strength. The Stoics saw every challenge as a chance to expand one's limits. An insult, an opportunity to practice patience. A loss, a chance to train detachment. A failure, fertile ground for humility. To them, pain was like hot clay in the hands of the soul, hardened too quickly, and it shatters. But if you work it with awareness, it shapes something no fortune could ever offer. Inner solidity, which brings us to something even deeper. Pain reveals us. It shows who we really are when we're no longer protected by our circumstances. It rips away the masks. It reveals our true voice, the one you can only hear in the middle of silence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, If you're distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Pain, then, is not just what happens. It's how we interpret what happens. And interpreting wisely is an art that takes training, that takes presence, that takes brutal honesty. Because not all pain is fair, not all loss is explainable, and not all suffering comes with clean lessons. But even in the most senseless pain, in the most incomprehensible loss, there remains a choice: to sink or to rise, to be consumed or to evolve. What the Stoics offer us is a tool, not to escape suffering, but to cross it with clarity. Imagine someone going through a painful divorce, or losing their job after years of commitment, or facing an illness that changes everything. That's when philosophy becomes real. That's when the trained mind stops looking for someone to blame and starts looking for meaning. Not easy answers, but internal growth. And slowly, something shifts. You begin to walk more steadily. You speak less, observe more. You react less, reflect more. Not because you've become cold, but because you've become calibrated. Like the warrior who knows battle is coming and doesn't fear it, because he is already trained with the weight of the sword. Long before facing the enemy, pain doesn't disappear. It simply changes roles. It stops being something that pushes you down and becomes something that pushes you inward. And maybe it's there, in the stillness, in the discomfort, in the void, that you finally discover something the world could never give you, the truth of who you are. But that's just the beginning, because if pain is the raw material, what do you do with it? How do you turn it from a blunt obstacle into a hidden power? That's the next lesson the Stoics will teach us. There is a decisive moment that separates who we are from who we have the potential to become. And that moment almost never happens in peace. It emerges in chaos, in collapse, in the instant when everything seems lost. And yet, something within us refuses to give up. Pain by itself doesn't transform. What transforms us is the choice we make in the midst of pain. And this is where Stoicism becomes a sharpened tool, because it teaches us that we are not prisoners of what we feel. We are masters of what we choose to do with what we feel. Epictetus said, "It's not the events themselves that disturb us, but the opinions we hold about them." And within that single sentence lies the key to inner freedom. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's revolutionary. Imagine someone who loses everything: job, partner, health. That person might spiral into despair, but they might also pause, breathe deeply, and ask, what can I learn from this? How can I grow in spite of this? That choice doesn't erase the pain, but it redirects it. It transforms the blow into movement, the fall into momentum. Seneca wrote that great souls are those who know how to endure noble suffering. That virtue doesn't reveal itself when life is easy, but when fate strikes without warning. And even so, the soul remains upright. And that applies to all of us, because pain is universal. But our response to pain is profoundly personal. Maybe you've already faced something like this: a betrayal that shattered you, a project that failed despite all your effort, a season of life that held so much promise until it all fell apart. In those moments, we stand at a fork in the road, to become victims of circumstance or architects of our own rebirth. And this is where the Stoic's daily practice begins. He doesn't wait for peace to act wisely. He acts wisely even while at war inside himself. And that requires something few cultivate: emotional discipline. Not the rigidity that denies pain, but the firmness that walks with pain without collapsing into paralysis. It's like a ship crossing a storm. The sea rages, the wind howls, but the helmsman is still there, steady, calm, adjusting the sails with precision. The Stoic is that helmsman, fully aware he cannot control the sea, but absolutely capable of steering himself. In daily life, this discipline appears in the smallest choices. Think of the pains you carry but never speak aloud, the silent self-criticism, the endless comparisons, the fear of failure no one else sees. These pains don't make headlines, but they erode you from within. And the Stoic trains in those hidden arenas. He turns the everyday into a battlefield of virtue, because he knows, if you can't deal with invisible pain, you'll never withstand the visible kind. This is the philosophy of self-mastery, not repression, but liberation from automatic reaction. It's the art of saying, even with a racing heart, I choose my response. And in that moment, something subtle happens. Pain becomes fuel. What once weighed you down becomes purpose. What once hurt now strengthens you. Some might call that insensitivity, but it's the opposite. It's trained sensitivity. It's the ability to feel deeply and still choose with clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes stronger by resisting life's blows, just as fire becomes more intense when fanned by the wind." The Stoic doesn't extinguish the flame at the first gust. He uses the wind to burn brighter. But here's something important. Not all pain is temporary. Some pain lasts months, some years, some maybe a lifetime. And the Stoic doesn't pretend otherwise. He doesn't romanticize suffering. He recognizes the weight and still carries it with strength. He knows that some wounds are not meant to heal, but to be integrated, transformed into direction, into consciousness, into legacy. Because some scars aren't meant to fade. They're meant to teach. And maybe you're living something like that right now. Something that doesn't go away. Something that tightens your chest at night. Something the world doesn't understand, but you feel deeply. It's precisely in those moments that Stoicism reveals its greatest power. Not as a shield that blocks the blow, but as a ground that holds you steady when everything shakes. And this leads us to the next step. Because if there are pains we can't avoid, and others we can't erase, there's still one last option. To walk through the darkness with courage. And even without knowing where it ends, keep walking. Not all pain has an end. Some passes, others remain. They settle into the body, or worse, into the soul. And they stay, with no schedule, no logic, no expiration date. And here, Stoicism demands something deeper from us. Not just the courage to endure pain, but the wisdom to live with it. Living with pain is a different kind of strength. It's not the strength that lifts weight. It's the strength that holds weight day after day without losing dignity. Epictetus understood this better than anyone. He didn't theorize about pain. He spoke from within it and still chose inner freedom. Illness is an obstacle for the body, but not for the will, unless the will chooses it to be. That distinction is brutal and liberating. The body may suffer. Life may limit us. But the mind is still ours. And that's where the greatest power of being human lives. But how do we do that in practice? How do you stay clear when the days are heavy? How do you not give in when there are no easy answers? The Stoic response doesn't come in formulas. It comes in inner rituals, small habits, small decisions, small acts that, together, hold the soul upright. Marcus Aurelius, even in exhaustion, would say to himself every morning, "Get up. You were made for this." That line isn't motivational. It's an act of philosophical faith, the belief that even in exhaustion, there is value in continuing. And often, that's what we lack. Not physical strength, but a purpose deep enough to justify the weight. Nietzsche would echo this centuries later. "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." That quote, which lives at the core of Stoicism, isn't just an idea. It's a compass. Suffering doesn't need to be resolved to be lived with dignity. It needs to be aligned with a purpose, and that changes everything. A father facing grief but staying alive for his children. A woman in depression who still rises every day to care for her aging mother. A young man lost in crisis who, despite the confusion, keeps seeking silence and meaning. None of these acts will be celebrated publicly, but each carries the Stoic code. Do not abandon yourself. And that doesn't mean romanticizing pain. It means not wasting it, because some pain destroys, and some pain sculpts. The difference lies in how you walk with it, even when the path is dark, even when you don't know where it ends. Many wait for pain to pass so they can go back to living, but the Stoics offer something else. Living with integrity, even while in pain. Not treating it as an obstacle to life, but as a part of it. It's a difficult path, but a deeply real one. And it's here that a new kind of strength is born. The strength of presence. The kind that doesn't deny the suffering, but also doesn't let it consume everything. That strength is built in silence, in getting out of bed without the will to, in breathing deeply when the mind is screaming, in saying yes to life, even without the promise of relief. That's where true virtue lives. Not in resisting just to resist, but in moving forward with meaning. Seneca reminds us, it is in adversity that the soul reveals itself. It's not about conquering pain. It's about not letting it steal what still makes us human. And perhaps this is one of Stoicism's greatest insights at this stage of the journey. Not all pain needs to be removed. Some just need to be carried with inner strength. And in that silent crossing, without applause or audience, something begins to happen. You start to notice a new layer in yourself. Denser, calmer, not invincible, but unbreakable where it matters most. Suddenly, the pain no longer defines who you are. It becomes part of your story, not the end of it. But there's one more forgotten lesson. One more truth the Stoics held that many ignore. Impermanence. Because even the longest pain doesn't last forever. And even the most intense suffering eventually fades. And when that happens, when the pain finally goes, who are you on the other side? That's where many people get lost. Which is why in the next topic, we'll explore how the Stoic not only survives pain, but grows through it. So its passing is never in vain. Pain wounds us, but it also reveals. It reveals what is excessive, what is essential, and sometimes it reveals a strength we never knew we had. In Stoicism, pain is not an ending. It is fertile ground. Rough, yes, often hostile, but it is precisely where nothing seems to grow. That virtue takes root most deeply. It's easy to be just when life is smooth. It's easy to be patient when the world offers comfort. But what about when everything collapses? When the days stretch endlessly and the nights grow even longer? It is in that winter of the soul that the Stoic plants roots. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Adversity is an opportunity for character." And he didn't say that as some distant ideal. He said it as a man familiar with pain, the loss of children, political betrayal, chronic illness, and both internal and external wars. And still, he wrote, he reflected, he grew, because he understood something most don't dare to consider. Not all pain must be overcome. Some pain must be cultivated. To cultivate pain? Yes, not by keeping it alive, but by letting it work silently within us. Just as soil needs the pressure of seasons to ripen a seed, so too do we need the season of pain for certain virtues to blossom. Patience, for example, doesn't come from instant gratification. It comes from repeated frustration, from denied desires, from time that refuses to match our urgency. Courage doesn't emerge in the absence of fear. It is born inside fear. It forms when we tremble and still move forward, when we want to quit but take one more step. And resilience, a word so often thrown around, so often emptied, it only holds real value when we stand by what we love, even as everything inside us screams for relief. In that sense, pain educates the soul. But for that to happen, we need something rare, inner space. We live in an age of constant distraction, pills for everything, instant solutions. But the Stoic doesn't rush to numb himself. He breathes, he observes, he lets the pain say what it came to say. Because sometimes, pain is pointing to something we've been ignoring, a forgotten truth, a toxic attachment, a path misaligned with who we really are. And to ignore that message is to extend the suffering. Virtue, to the Stoics, wasn't a medal. It was a consequence, the result of living with integrity, even under pressure, of acting with awareness, even in chaos. Look at someone who lost everything: home, job, connections. The world calls that failure. But the Stoic asks, who did you become in the midst of it? If you became more generous, more present, more honest with yourself, then pain did not win. It merely fulfilled its purpose, to shape. And that's when suffering transforms. It's no longer something that happened to you, but part of who you chose to become. And slowly, you realize that which once broke you also reorganized you, maybe in a way you never could have reached on your own. True growth is almost always invisible at first. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't come with fanfare. It happens in the dark, gradually, in how you begin to respond to life. In the silence you learn to value, in the compassion that grows after you felt deeply, in the steadiness born from each sleepless night you've endured. Growth is a slow, subtle curve, but one day, when you look back, you'll see you're no longer the same. That's why the Stoic doesn't wait to feel ready to grow. He grows through the storm. He doesn't wait for summer plant. He plants in winter with trembling hands, knowing that sooner or later spring will come. And that's one of the most neglected virtues today. Active patience, the ability to cultivate, even without guarantees. To trust the process, even when you don't yet see the outcome. Picture a plant growing through a crack in concrete. No one sees it, no one waters it, but insists. The Stoic is that plant, blooming where no one expects, growing without applause, carrying the memory of pain, but blooming anyway. But what happens when the pain finally fades? When things begin to improve? That's when a new challenge emerges, one few ever talk about. Because after pain, many forget. They forget who they became. They forget the lessons. They forget the silence, the humility, the depth they had cultivated. Which is why, in the next and final topic, we'll explore what the Stoic does after the pain, how he carries what he's learned, and how he turns suffering into living wisdom. Pain fades. Not all of it, not all at once, but like a tide slowly retreating, it gives way. And then what remains? Some return to life as if nothing happened. Others carry their suffering like a wound that never closes. But the Stoic carries something else. Responsibility. The responsibility of having grown, of no longer being the same, of honoring the pain that was endured. Because once pain is consciously endured, it leaves behind a gift. Sometimes subtle, sometimes brutal, but always transformative. The Stoic doesn't go through pain to forget it. He goes through it to integrate it, to become someone who honors what he endured, not with self-pity, but with presence. Like a tree that has survived a storm, it loses branches, it bends, but when the sun returns, it stands more rooted, wiser, more whole. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And after pain, those thoughts change. The palette changes, the depth shifts. What once felt urgent now feels irrelevant. What once was noise now falls silent. What once distracted now exhausts. The Stoic, after pain, begins to live with greater focus, with simplicity, with clarity about what truly matters. But that clarity comes with a burden, because those who have seen pain up close see the world with new eyes. And you can no longer pretend. You can't go back to the surface. You can't surrender to the numbness of excess, the noise of urgency, the comfort of sedation. Pain teaches, but it only transforms those who accept the duty to apply what they've learned. Think of someone who has experienced deep grief, or an existential crisis, or a period of total collapse. If that person chose to grow, they can no longer live the way they once did. They now carry the responsibility to be better, more just, more centered, more present in small gestures, because now they know what pain demands, and they know how much it costs to ignore what's essential. Seneca reminds us, the road to wisdom through theory is long. Through example, it's short and effective. And the greatest example anyone can give is how they return to life after pain. Not as a hero, but as someone more mature, less reactive, more serene. The Stoic understands that after pain comes a second choice. What will you do with the strength it left behind? You can use it to dominate, or to serve, to isolate, or to understand, to harden, or to nurture. Because not all strength needs to be rigid. There is a gentle strength, quiet, discreet, the kind that listens more than it speaks, that welcomes instead of judges, that leads without needing to control. This is the kind of strength pain can produce, if it's well digested. But here lies the danger. Forgetting. After the storm, the sun returns, and with it, the temptation to fall asleep. The mind relaxes, vigilance fades, the soul drifts. So the Stoic holds a ritual. He remembers, not with longing, not with guilt, but with respect. He remembers what shaped him. He remembers what nearly broke him, and what kept him standing. Above all, he remembers who he promised to become after the pain. That's the Stoic's commitment. And it's not about perfection. It's about coherence, about being responsible with the strength you've earned. Like an archer who's spent years tuning his bow. Now that he knows how to use it, he no longer shoots impulsively. Every arrow has a direction. Every gesture carries weight. The same applies to the soul. Once you discover what's unbreakable within you, you can no longer live carelessly. The Stoic becomes a guardian of his own consciousness, not out of fear, but out of reverence for what pain helped forge. And maybe that's the hidden gift of suffering. It doesn't just reveal your strength. It makes you want to honor it. And that changes everything. Because now, every small choice matters. Every conversation matters. Every reaction matters. Every silence is full. You no longer seek to overcome pain. You seek to live in accordance with what it taught you. And that's a rare kind of freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to never betray who you've become. You've walked through pain, and now you carry something that can't be taught, only lived. But even though the journey seems complete, there is still one final question at the center of it all. What remains when all the noise falls silent? What is born when pain stops being shadow and becomes inner light? The answer doesn't fit in words, but it will guide us through the conclusion. Some pain fades, others remain in silence. They no longer scream, no longer burn like they once did, but they're still there, not as open wounds, but as living marks of what you've survived. The Stoic doesn't try to erase these marks. He doesn't turn them into trophies. He turns them into commitments. A commitment to clarity, to humility, to the wisdom that can only be born when the ground disappears beneath your feet and you're forced to rebuild everything from the inside. Pain transforms us, but it is the way we choose to live after pain that determines what was truly transformed. Maybe you felt this. Maybe you're feeling it now. That subtle shift in the way you see the world. A tiredness of the superficial. A thirst for meaning. That's what pain leaves behind when it's heard. It carves out space. Space where what truly matters can grow. Consciousness, discernment, presence. After pain, the world may stay the same, but you're not the same anymore. And that changes everything. You begin to observe more and react less, to value more and complain less, to seek less control and more direction. Because now, you carry something many lose along the way. Intention. You know what's worth your time. You know what weighs on your soul. You know what can no longer be ignored. And maybe, right now, something in you has already shifted. Maybe you can't name it yet, but deep down you feel it. Something steadier, clearer, quieter inside you. If this video spoke to you, don't keep it all to yourself. Leave a comment, share a pain that shaped you, or just write a single phrase that reflects where you are right now. Sometimes, one honest word at the right moment is enough to keep someone from giving up. If this message resonated with you, like the video, that small gesture helps the channel grow. But more than that, it tells yourself there is value in looking inward, in pausing, in reflecting. And if you'd like to keep walking the Stoic path with us, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Each new video isn't just content, it's a call to awareness. Stoic philosophy was never meant to decorate bookshelves, but to hold the soul when nothing else can. It doesn't promise peace. It teaches presence. It doesn't erase chaos. It shows you, in the middle of it, what within you remains unshakable. And pain, it was never the end. It was the entry point, a narrow, dark, uncomfortable passage that always leads to a wider space within. It's not about forgetting what hurt you. It's about no longer living under its rule. If you made it this far, you've already taken a step. Maybe you've already realized there's something in you that didn't break and never will. Good. Hold that close. Protect it with your choices and share it with courage. Pain was the fire. You are what rose from it. And now, go forward, not in a rush, but with intention, because there is much to do with the strength that remains. And the world, even if it doesn't know it, needs those who have walked through pain and returned with calmer eyes.